Hello everyone, my name is Sarvesh Goyal, and as you mentioned by Elias, I work as a segment architect within Shell, and on this wonderful day, I'm actually going to share some of my experiences that might help you in actually designing the enterprise scale cloud actually platform specifically on sort of Microsoft Azure, uh, right? Now, what we have in terms of the agenda for you, I know, which is actually quite simple. We are first going to set the context, which means what are our cloud needs, right? In terms of traditional IT and also our current cloud needs. What are the key principles that we need to that we that we need to focus on, and what should be our key considerations when we sort of design the Azure cloud for the sort of whole of the enterprise, right? And then towards the end, let's try to deep dive into couple of sort of examples, and I will try to give at least 10 minutes to the Q&A so that any questions that you may have, I will try to answer. Sort of towards end of the session. About myself, I'm Sarvesh. I have over 20 years of experience in solving the business problems using IT. But the last 6 years, that is in Shell, and prior to Shell, I was working for sort of Mindtree Consulting. My last 6 years of my experience have been focused on building the enterprise platforms, and that's the experience that I'm going to share with you now. I'm also a public speaker, mainly in the sort of Microsoft conferences, sort of such as Gap. I have got my own personal blog. The link of it you can see it, on the screen, and then I can be contacted on my sort of LinkedIn, page as well, right? That's a link that you see over there. Now, let's see the context, right? So now what happens is when we say that, hey, look, I use cloud for my apps, and these are traditional IT needs, and I want you guys to go slightly sort of back in time. Let's say in about 2015 or 2016, if you ask some of those folks in the business that, hey, look, we are going to move your applications on cloud, the general or typical thinking was to build a build a 2 or 3 tier architecture on the cloud, which is your web layer or application layer, as well as your sort of data layer. And in some cases, there were deployments around the typical data ETL, and also build the data actually sort of the warehouses, right? Slightly going forward, people started thinking about software defined networking. So when you had asked someone a question that what is cloud, right? Maybe back in 2015, or maybe even before, they all would say cloud is nothing but software defined compute, software defined storage, software defined sort of networking, right? Sort of nothing else, right? So the previously, if you have to build a server, you would actually go to your data center, get a actual physical box, have it sort of installed, within your sort of data center boundaries, right? And then only then you can install your Windows, your Windows server, and then install applications. But with cloud, that thing changed a lot, right? Now you can actually go to the Azure portal, or way back in 2015, deploy a virtual machine, right? Deploy a virtual network, deploy storage, and then you can deploy your applications. So I think that was all. There was also a need to have this sort of centralized identity, and people started deploying the Microsoft Active sort of Directory on the cloud to support their virtual machine workloads, right? So in case if you have applications that actually run on LDAP, or maybe run on Kerberos, we saw businesses. I've actually done it myself. We started deploying the Active sort of directories on the cloud, right? Now we don't see that need, you know sort of anymore, right? Previously, there were some PaaS services that were actually quite common, such as the Azure Web App, or maybe the sort of SQL PaaS. But you know, traditionally, that was our cloud needs, right? But now but now that we are in 2020 or 2021, what has changed, right? There are whole lot of new sort of dimensions that have got added to the cloud, right? So now, most of the enterprises do not talk about single cloud, right? So No one wants to lock themselves to a single cloud supplier. So sort of in this case Azure, the most of the enterprises have actually multi-cloud platforms, which is their applications running on Azure, AWS, and sometimes also on Google Cloud. uh, the companies or the enterprises also wants to grow into the unknown sort of territories as well, such as if you actually acquire a company or with your sort of partner network or even with your customer base. So let's take an example, sort of a Netflix, right? So if actually Netflix wants to stream their videos or their movies or their shows onto a completely new country or a new geo, all they have to do is they have to just sort of go to the Azure platform, deploy their application workload with a single click, and then boom, right? They are good. They actually don't have to set up a new physical data centers anymore. Same way, if actually Netflix wants to, let's say, sort of shut down some of their sort of regions, all of it can now be done with just a single click, right? Now, there are much more advanced capabilities that are actually required by the large or maybe the mid-size enterprises, such as AI, blockchain, big data, machine learning, the cyber security, IoT, for example, things like sort of a robotic processes, automation. There are things, the current trend is about the VR, which is the virtual virtual reality, things like digital twins, and also the 3D printing, right? And then things about data science. These are the capabilities that our enterprises needs today on top of the standard virtual machine based workloads, or maybe a standard web app or a SQL database based workloads, right? Now the growing partner needs are also becoming quite important. Now the software development do not happen just by a single team, right? Sometimes the customers that you work for, or sometimes the customer that you work with, they also want to co-build uh, the applications with you, which means their software developers as well as your developers would be working on the same piece of code. That's also a requirement today. Customization based on the customer needs, and also deploying multi tenant apps also makes our cloud sort of deployments quite complex. The next key point is to develop a single identity platform for all of our platforms as well as for the apps that we host, which means your one token. So I think okay, the the kind of requirement is that you need to sign in only once, and once you log in, then your token needs to be accepted by all the applications that you access sort of within the enterprise. No one now uh, likes to log into actually sort of a multiple applications, yeah, with the same sort of login ID and password, right? Or maybe with a different ID and password. So the single account actually becomes a need. Security and governance is actually quite a key, because we all need to safeguard uh, the applications that we run and also the data that we host, right? Because one security incident can actually impact the company's image, as well as it can also have the sort of monetary impact on the also on the enterprises. And the last one is the exponential data growth, right? Now, I think today when we talk about all of these examples that I've mentioned in point three, which is IoT and big data and machine learning, data science, artificial intelligence, blockchain, whatnot, right? All of these applications have actually made the data grow within the enterprises, sort of a multiple folds, right? And that actually demands that the compute layer as well as the storage layer needs to scale to the new sort of demands that we have, right? So this is what that has changed uh, you know uh, over the last 4 or 5 years, in, within the uh, you know industry, right? And then we also want to explain that, hey, look, the techie jargons that I think some of the folks in IT might use, don't help actually with the business, right? So the businesses today won't care if you tell them that, hey, look, I run your application workload on actually Kubernetes, or I'm actually giving you Azure sort of data lake storage or whatever, right? No one cares about it, right? I think what people care about is that how actually secure their applications are we able to deliver the business values. And just by using a techie jargon such as, hey, look, I now host my application on containers or maybe on sort of Kubernetes, do not actually help solve the business problems, right? And what those business problems are, that is something that we are going to unfold uh, in this sort of a session as well. But the point over here is that it probably does not, it probably does not help if you just take the same old code and just sort of move the same very code from, let's say, virtual machine to Azure web app, from Azure web app to a container, and from containers to Kubernetes. That's actually not solving the business problems. They're just using some sort of techie deployments within the sort of within the enterprises, but it's not actually solving the business problems. Right now, let's deep dive into the enterprise sort of design guidance and some of the foundation principles that we want. These are the five principles that probably that we always focus on. The first one is being the security. For us, the security is the key, right? So we need to secure our applications from all the security threats that we get from the internet, which means deployment of firewalls, doing an appropriate logging, deploying the patterns to secure our accounts, to secure our applications, as well as to secure our sort of network, and take the actions proactively rather than taking the actions so sort of reactively. So the security is the key. The next comes is the quality, which means the platform and the applications that we want to give to our enterprise meets all the enterprise needs and meets the quality, which means it actually does the job that it's supposed to do, right? So if you are actually deploying, let's say, actually sort of Kubernetes cluster, the Kubernetes cluster gives us the right level of performance. It's able to actually host the multiple applications. It has all the it has got all the sort of bells and whistles in it, so that it actually delivers the business value that we want, right? The third one is the performance, wherein the application users as well as the application itself do not face application latency, and then it should not impact any of the performance as well, right? Sort of a user experience is also important, which means the experience that we want to give to our software developers, the experience that we want to give to our application users, the data engineers, data scientists, uh, self-service business users, for example, right? Their experiences also needs to be factored in, which means when they want to, let's say, get access to the data, the applications and the tooling and the sort of capabilities that they want to use to get access to the data, for example, or to the enterprise services, then their experience is seamless yet secured, right? So if they log in with their account, their identity needs to flow all the way up to all the applications and data, so that they can get access to the data, right? But if we actually give them the sort of user experience wherein they have to log in multiple times, they have to actually go through between multiple screens and you know uh, multiple ways of sort of doing the same things, I don't think it's actually going to create a very good sort of a user experience. And the last one is a cost, right? So we also need to keep cost as sort of a minimum as possible, or the cost should be able to deliver the value that it justifies, right? So we cannot really have an expensive solution which is actually not delivering the value that is required. So I think cost is also a key, uh, you know the key factor. Moving on, so this is are the key considerations, right? So after the principles, we now have the key considerations that we must focus on while deploying the enterprise cloud. Now what you see at the bottom of the screen is, let me just hide this. So what you see at the bottom of the screen is the sort of foundation capabilities, which means you need to build your security layer in terms of Azure Security Center, in terms of building the activity logs, you know, deploying the firewalls, for instance. We are going to see those items as well, in the slide back. So we need to lay down our foundation capabilities, which are nothing but identity, networking, monitoring, and security, which is going to be shared uh, across all the application workloads. Some of the large enterprises have a dedicated Azure accounts or a dedicated Azure subscriptions to host their sort of business applications. Plus, they also have some of those sort of special services or the domain sort of subscriptions. Those could be used to deploy your enterprise, Kubernetes. It can be used to to deploy your enterprise data lake and also the non-Azure services such as your Kubeflow or MLflow when it comes to sort of data science workloads. But all the business application and hosting services such as Azure Machine Learning or your web app or the SQL database or the Cosmos databases, for example, they all would sit in the business application hosting sort of subscriptions. And on top, we need to build a multiple shared sort of capabilities such as Devantest Labs, DevOps tools like GitHub and Azure DevOps, and also the application integration layer, right? So if you want to move your data using APIs or maybe using a different set of services in terms of data access or data sort of virtualization, all of them would sit under a shared set of capabilities, right? Now this is a typical enterprise cloud sort of a landscape. And what we need to consider, so we need to ensure the connectivity that it exists. We need to ensure the identity patterns have been deployed, and the access management for the platform, for the application, as well as for the data is actually maintained quite well. And I'm going to explain all of this, all of these key considerations in the next slide, right? The other three are software engineering, logging and auditing, as well as supportability. Supportability is the key. We cannot have we cannot have a complex platform which takes a long time uh, to actually support it, right? So if you have a support ticket, the support team should not take, let's say, a couple of days to solve a simple problem. Rather, we need to build a platform that can be supported by the application teams themselves. And I'm also going to explain that as well, right, in terms of thoughts. So when we talk about the connectivity, right? Now, if you see here on the screen, we have the foundation Azure. We have got, let's say, a bunch of PaaS services as well as the virtual machines. We have got the Kubernetes layer. We have got few PaaS services such as sort of data lake, some of the non-Azure services, right? Now, how do we ensure the connectivity exists, right? So we can leverage tools such as Azure private links. Azure private links is a service from Azure that connects your PaaS services to the virtual network, which means your virtual machines can now connect to the PaaS services not over the internet, but they can actually connect those PaaS services via the Azure managed backbone, right? And this keeps your connection quite secure. VNet peering, which is within the region, or also global VNet peering, is something that we use as well extensively. The Azure firewalls. So Azure has a new service which is called Azure Firewall. But each of those virtual machines or the PaaS services also have got these sort of firewalls configured, or the has got firewalls option wherein you can actually configure what services can actually come in, and then connect to the Azure PaaS services, right? Then we can also use the network security groups with tags. Tags is nothing but the application tags. So you can use tags like load balancer or the sort of Power BI, etc. Now the services only from those tags will then be allowed. And the Azure also has got a new feature called as allow Azure services to connect to the PaaS services. That will ensure that it's only the Azure services that can actually connect to it, and then you don't have to actually configure a specific IP addresses and so on. This is quite basic, but connectivity is actually quite important, because if you have got your containerized workloads running, if you have got, let's say, multiple containers, so Kubernetes is going to deploy your multiple Docker nodes, and those Docker nodes are going to have your multiple pods and containers, right? Each of those pods and containers are going to have the different IP addresses. How do we ensure that those IP addresses are able to get to your SQL PaaS service, right? So I think that is why, if you can establish a connectivity between your Kubernetes services with things such as private links, and if you have to do it just once, and once that is done, then the Kubernetes can then securely connect to the Azure PaaS services, right? And these are the common problems that our businesses generally face, right? So the connectivity is actually quite important. Express route can also be deployed. So if you have the on-premise network, the on-premise network can then be extended onto the cloud via the express route, and then you can leverage the private links as well as the private endpoints to connect securely from your on-premise network up to the cloud, leveraging the express route, which means your traffic is now not going over the internet. The traffic is all within your uh, within your control network. Moving on, identity is again quite key. We need to so when we actually design the enterprise cloud, we need to design identities for these sort of identities for the platform itself, which is, let's say, identity required to log into the Azure portal, manage some of your virtual machines, the configurations, the Azure policies and management groups. As an example, identities for your application itself, right? So once you have your .NET application, right? So do you want to use SAML or OAuth or sort of OpenID for your sort of B2C customers, for example? And all of these identity providers can actually be different, right? So if you want to have your identity provider for Azure, it is definitely the Azure AD, right? But your application can can be either connected to the AAD, right, which is the Azure AD, or an application can be onboarded onto a different identity providers. It could be Okta, or it could be the Ping identity that has been acquired also by the sort of Microsoft, right? But the Ping identity can also sort of federate to the Azure AD, right? So which means you now have a single account to log into to actually log into your platform as well as to your application. The customer identities, which means if you have a customer leveraging their accounts of Hotmail or Gmail or whatever, right? Those customer identities for your applications can be a different of providers, such as sort of Gendrain can be used to onboard your application onto these providers. But then when we actually need to design, we actually need to understand that how would the applications access the sort of platform services, right? And we also need to, for that we can use these sort of managed identities, which is also a new service from sort of Microsoft. You can also use the SPNs, the identities, which is sort of user identities. It needs to use the MFA, which is the sort of multi-factor auth. We also need to ensure that the users log in from the trusted devices, which means you just can't go to any PC or maybe any machine, log into your Azure portal, and that token is now valid for, I don't know, 100 days or 180 days, something like that, right? So we also need to ensure that the users that your staff logs in from the trusted locations as well as on the trusted devices, right? So what we use is the certificates, that can be used, to actually, those can be installed on the devices, and the login is only supported from those devices. There are tools from Microsoft such as the conditional access, wherein the policies can be defined as to who can access what, and then from where. And also the privileged identity management, it can be used to then grant a time-bound access to your software developer or the support teams or the application support teams, to your platform services such as the Azure portal, the virtual machines, the PaaS services, and so on. The application controls would anyway sort of needs to be there in place, such as the timeout, for example. And the applications can also be onboarded, like I said, onto the Azure AD, which means all of these policies that you have configured, such as conditional access or the trusted devices and locations, would then also apply to those. Next, we are going to talk about the access management, which is ensure that the right people have right access to the platform at the right time, right? So how do we ensure that? We can leverage something called as Azure AD Access Reviews. So Azure AD Access Reviews is a feature that can be run on the Azure AD group. Okay, a step back. So when we have the Azure services, the Azure services are generally granted permissions based on the Azure AD groups, right? It would be a bad security practice if we add the accounts directly onto your Azure services directly, right? All the permissions needs to be managed only via the Azure AD groups. And within the Azure AD groups, when you have the members, you can now set up a policy on the Azure AD groups to do the access reviews, which means person who owns the Azure AD groups it could be someone from your support team or the security teams, or even the or you know or even your business. you know uh, they can actually get or 2 months or 6 months. The setting can be configured, and it's actually going to sort of notify the access sort of review that, hey, look, these are the bunch of people who have access to the certain Azure services, leveraging certain Azure AD groups. Not, do you still want to grant them access? Right now, once the access reviews are done, people who actually need not be part of groups can then also be removed, right, as part of the access reviews feature. This will ensure that the right people have right access to the data, right? Entitlement management is also one of the new feature, so that is from Azure, wherein the multiple groups can be combined to then actually define a role. So you can actually define a role such as security reader, or let's say a data scientist, or maybe I don't know, HR or finance or something like that, right? Now those roles can have sort of multiple groups, and those multiple groups can then be assigned to, let's say, multiple services, applications, or even data. And then the moment you add someone to the role, the person automatically gets access to all the to get access to all the Azure platform services as well as data, right? Next to that, we can leverage the PIM, which is the privilege identity management. This is a service that actually grants a time bound access uh, to a specific team or a person uh, on the Azure services, or even and even access to your data for his for example. So if you have a data lake, for instance, you can then configure data lake access via the Azure AD groups, and those accesses can then be controlled via the PIM, which is a time bound access. Like, you can say that the access is granted only for an hour, or maybe only for sort of couple of hours, for example, right? Moving on, the software engineering, right? So which is quite key. We need to create the culture, within the enterprise, wherein any configuration, any deployment, any setting happens only via the code, right? So which means create the culture of deploy and destroy as many times you want, right? So if you have the culture of doing your uh, dev environment, the test environment, the acceptance environment, as well as the prod, the entire cycle, which is to configure your compute nodes, also to configure your data nodes. Everything needs to happen only via the code. There should be no or very least configurations that needs to happen that needs to happen manually. Otherwise, all deployment needs to happen via the code, right? Which means encourage deployment using code, use code scanning tools, software testing tools, for example. And tools like Terraform could be of great help, simply because if you want to, let's say, develop a skill to deploy your workloads across, I don't know, so multiple clouds, which is Azure, AWS, Google, etc. Terraform could be one tool that you can use. While on Azure, you can also use the ARM templates, or you could also use the PowerShell, or also the APIs that can be used to configure some of these services. uh, The next one is on the logging and auditing, which I think is actually quite important, because sort of preventive controls over the sort of reactive controls tools are actually most important. There's no point in actually telling your business that, hey, look, this particular application was attacked 1,000 times, I don't know, in the last 24 hours, and we may potentially have some data leaks, right? The businesses are actually not going to like this statement. What we can tell them that, hey, look, we have all the sort of preventive controls in place, wherein any possible attack, whether it's a sort of DDoS attack or any sort of attack, uh, can actually be contained, before that attack actually goes and hits the data, right? So what you can leverage tools such as sort of Azure sort of Security Center. The Azure Security Center is actually a very great tool. It has got all the sort of built-in policies that can be configured to alert, and sometimes to configure the services as well, in a very secure way, right? So Azure Security Center is going to flag if your SQL databases have not configured with, let's say, firewalls, encryption, the access management, or if you have got, let's say, sort of multiple owners configured on your Azure account, the security center is actually going to flag it, right? You can also use the Azure policies. Event grids can also be used. So how you can use event grids? So if you have an event or an activity log, it can be captured via the event grids, such as, so let me share an example. If you have a business who has actually deployed a SQL server, for instance, and if the business has forgotten to, let's say, turn on the firewall or to turn on the TD encryption, for instance, those can be configured. Those such unsecure deployments can be fixed either either leveraging the Azure policies. But if those policies, let's say, do not support some of the configurations that you need, then you can also configure the event grids, wherein it's going to catch all the deployments, and then you can actually trigger an Azure function. And the Azure function is actually going to go to that resource, validate whether the sort of deployment itself is secure or not, and then it can actually take an action, for instance. Or if you have a virtual machine, and if you need a virtual machine to be deployed with, let's say, a certain applications, could be your could be the tools that coming from your cyber defense team, then the event grids or even the virtual machines extensions can be used to actually deploy such such extensions, right? Activity logs, as well as the log analytics can be used to create control plane that is actually required, right? But I've not mentioned on this slide is there's also need to configure the firewall as well as the WAF, right? So Azure has got this web application firewalls. It is not recommended that we publish our applications directly 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 to the internet, right? The application needs to be safeguarded via some sort of firewall, or by some sort of the web application firewalls, so that any attack can then also be contained, right? And then if you can limit the number of IPs that can actually connect to your that can actually connect to your services, and also limit the number of accounts, that's also going to secure services. And those identity patterns that I've explained are also going to help over here, right? The next one is the supportability, wherein we need to create boundaries, and there's no need to create these dependencies on our support teams, right? So what we do is we can actually create a very safe boundary, and we can tell our businesses that, hey, look, this is your boundaries that you can actually work in, that you can operate in. You can do whatever you like, but then you are not going to go beyond this boundary, right? So for instance, you can whitelist a bunch of the Azure services, let's say Azure ML service or PaaS services or virtual machine workloads, right, and so on. And then we can say, hey, look, the businesses can actually deploy the services that they want. They can configure the services they want. You are anyway going to keep them secure, leveraging the Azure policies, the management groups, the Azure security center, for instance. And within those boundaries, businesses can actually do whatever they want, right? You can also create the RBAC roles, or even custom roles, to actually give businesses the permissions that are required. Now, some of the items which are from the sort of platform perspective needs to be managed by the IT, and those platform components can also be exposed, can also be published via the APIs, so that businesses can actually write all the all the code for them to manage their platform, to also manage the infrastructure as well as the application workloads, right? So I think today our businesses are not demanding that, hey, look, well, today they should do not want someone to deploy a virtual machine for them, or even deploy a SQL server, or maybe an Azure ML service, or whatever, right? They want the platform to actually support such deployments, right? And that is why we need to create boundaries, and we should not create dependencies. And the life of the you know the life of the support you know the support team should also have the sufficient tools for them to support the entire the entire business landscape, and that can be done by actually automating everything, right? As I mentioned in the software engineering patterns, that everything has to be code driven, and not configured manually. right? Now these are the key considerations. Now we see what we have, right? So let's actually deep dive into an example. As I said, now we actually saw multiple examples, right? Sort of previously, right? Like, you may have the very key advanced features such as artificial intelligence, digital twins, 3D printing, big data, and so on. So let's deep dive onto the data, big data, or maybe the sort of data domain services. Now over here, if you see here, the entire life cycle of your data domain services is to get data from your source systems, right? Which is yours, could be SaaS services, could be your applications, could be your I don't know your CRM, or sort of finance applications, right? Once data gets onto the cloud, it needs to be stored, it needs to be transformed. We need to deploy certain access as well as the governance tools on them. Then we also need to create the sort of visualization layer for them, just by actually building a layer for modeling and so on. This will be supported by the sort of foundation services that I've explained in terms of engineering, security, identity, and so on. And there'll be multiples of business use cases, such as applications such as the data marts, data hubs, data warehouses, data science applications, reporting tools that want to actually connect to your data, right? Now, what are the challenges that we may face, right? The contributing factors that makes a design good or bad are flow of data, flow of identity, flow of, as well as the connectivity with security and governance embedded. Right now, if we have not thought of how will my identity work across all of these different layers that we have, that we have not touched upon in terms of storage, transformation, access and governance, reporting, identity integrations, the data hubs and so on. If I'm not able to connect between these multiple layers, and if I'm not able to get access to my data at a right time, right, with the right level of security as well as governance, the businesses are not going to like it, right? So we need to, I think the effort is needed so that the business dependency on IT is actually minimum, right? So instead of them waiting for weeks and months to get access to the data, it should it should all be in minutes, right? So there's few things known as sort of birthrights, for example, like if you're a data scientist, or if you're a security architect, or if you're a security engineer or a cyber defense engineer, by def- by having those birthrights, the people, the person should have the right access to the data, as well as to build your self-service BI tool, such as reporting. Like someone wants to generate a report as to what percentage of sales was done in the month of March and April, and if all of that data has been ingested onto your data lakes, right? It should be fairly easy for a salesperson to actually go to your data and then able to generate that data. I mean, sort of generate the report, right? But that would be impossible if we have not thought of, if I've not thought of things like, building the right patterns for the identity, right patterns for the connectivity, as well as security, right? We also cannot publish all of our data to the internet, right? So that is why we need to have a right patterns embedded into our designs as well, right? So that the business applications, when they onboard, and those business use cases are just examples, right? Could be artificial intelligence or data science, Qflow, MLflow, data virtualization, data access management, or I don't know, even let me just look at my notes. So even with maybe blockchain or IoT or whatever, right? Once these foundation services are laid out quite well, the businesses will be able to, they will be able to configure their services and also get value from the data, right? There's one more example that I want to also deep dive, right? Let's say we have got our the same example that we had, that we had seen on the sort of previous slide. Assuming if that was done on, let's say that was done on these sort of multiple clouds, right? So you have a same set of tools for data ingestion, storage, the data transformation done on both Azure as well as the AWS cloud, because the company was actually focused on Azure, but there were some business acquisitions, and those business acquisitions run their application workloads on the AWS cloud, right? Now, how do we then deliver the business value, right, to our businesses, right? So in this case, we're going to have our compute services, ingestion services, data storage running across multiple clouds. What we need to do is we need to build a set of shared services along with these sort of foundation services, such as data catalog, visualization, virtualization, integration, software development, identity, and security patterns. So let me give an example. If you develop your applications on Azure and AWS, and if you onboard them onto a common identity provider, such as it could be Azure AD, or it could be Okta, or even the sort of even sort of Ping identity, right? From the sort of businesses perspective, it won't change their experience, right? To actually businesses, it won't matter whether the application is actually hosted on Azure, or maybe different cloud, AWS cloud, because their identity or their token is now able to access the applications as well as data running on multiple clouds, right? Connectivity, again, the same thing, right? You could configure firewalls, you can configure WAF, you can configure, well, you cannot configure the private links between the two, but you can actually deploy local firewalls, let's say even a Palo Alto or anything, and you can actually get connected both these cloud platforms, right? Now if your data needs to flow across the cloud for the various compute needs, then the data can also flow, right? Or sometimes for your light workloads, data can actually sit on the AWS cloud, and your compute services can even sit on Azure, right? If your data compute needs are actually quite low in terms of volume. But if the volume is high, then you may want to move compute to the data, or maybe move your sort of data to the compute, right? But I think those are the foundation services that we need to yeah, I think that we need to think on. And I think this was my last slide. We can wait for the Q&A. And what I wanted to explain on this slide is not exactly what you need to do within your application landscape, but I just wanted to, I don't know, I just wanted to you know put that seed in your in the brain that, hey, look, when the enterprise cloud services are to be designed, these are the various considerations and factors that actually must be considered uh, you know before we start onboarding the more complex applications or the services onto the cloud, because if we do not lay the foundation right, uh, then making changes to it later could be quite expensive, right? So with this, I will stop here.